our today's class, that is economics. And for the today's class, we continue with our revision, and we were to talk about the international trade. And then after we talk about the international trade, we'll also be able to talk about what we call the economic development, that is economic planning and development. So let's talk about the international trade, and finance. That is now still we are on what we call the macro economics. That is now on the international trade and what we call finance. Now, when you talk of international trade in this case, this is a trade that is between many countries all over the world. And what you need to be aware in this case, number one, is on the benefits of international trade. That is the benefits, or what we call benefits or the advantages of international trade. And benefits are international trade. But one, it is that there is what we call improvement of infrastructure. That is number one, improvement of infrastructure. Second one, it enables the country to acquire goods that they cannot be produced cheaply at home. Then also it promotes exchange of technology among different countries. It also encourages mobility of factors of production from one country to another. It also improves the standards of living of the citizens as they can import goods which are not produced at home. It also prevents the emergency of a monopoly. Then also the market prices of goods fall due to stiff competition. Variety of also goods and services are also made available. And then also it encourages efficiency due to stiff competition among the different countries. That is on the advantages, and that is what you need to be aware on that regard. Then the second thing that you also need to be aware is on the theories of international trade. Theories of international trade. Now, on the theories of international trade, in this case, we will have two theories. And number one is what we call the theory of absolute advantage. Number one, this theory of absolute advantage. This one was developed by the Adam Smith. So on the theory of absolute advantage, in this case, a country is said to have an absolute advantage in production of commodity if it can produce commodity more efficiently than another country, if it can produce commodities more efficiently than other country. What we mean in this case, if it can produce commodities at the lowest cost than any other country. That is now what we mean in this regard. And that is whereby the countries be said to have absolute advantage. So in that case also, you need to be aware of the same on how in this case it argued. Now, for this theory argued that the value of goods is proportional to the labor, that is the amount of labor that is employed in production. That is what this theory in this case argued. that the value of goods produced in this case is proportional to the amount of labor that is employed in production. That is on the absolute advantage. Number two is what we call the comparative advantage. Comparative advantage. The theory of comparative advantage. And this one now was developed out by David Ricardo. Now, on the David Ricardo, in this case, he also argued that, or he believed that two countries can still gain even if one country is more productive than other in all lines of production. So in this case, he's saying that a country has a comparative advantage if it can produce something at lower cost as compared to another country. That is also what he meant on that regard. So in this case, what you need to be aware is the assumptions of comparative advantage, which in this case is also what we call the limitations. And this is a question that was there in the sitting of May 2019. On May 2019, that was the question number 5C, whereby you are required to outline 6 limitations of theory of comparative advantage as used in international trade. And those are the assumptions, and one of it is that it argues that only two types of two countries are involved in international trade. The other assumption is that only two commodities are traded in the international trade. And then the third one is that no transport cost of goods traded between the two countries. So in that case, it is assuming there are two countries, there are two commodities, and no transport cost that is incurred by the by the transport between or traded between the two countries. No barriers to trade, since in this case there is existence of free trade. And then the last factor is that, or assumption or limitation, is that there is what we call free factor mobility. Those are the limitations, which in this case are also the same as assumptions. So also there is what we call the increasing cost. There is a possibility that specialization could lead to increased what? Increased cost. And then also there is also what we call the obstacles to trade. And the obstacles to trade in this case, we are talking about the what? The currencies. We also talking about the tariffs and also the taxes, which generally in this case, we are talking about the import duty. So that is what you need to understand on regards to that part. And then there is another thing that you need to be aware is what we call protectionism in finance. Protectionism in finance, or generally what we call protection in finance. Protection in finance. Now, in this case, here we are talking about the restrictions that are normally involved with an objective of, in this case, protecting the infant industries in our country. So the restriction that the government, like here in Kenya, that is going to do in order to protect the infant countries or industries that are still growing, and this is within our country. So in this case, one of the things that you need to know is the restrictions that the government can impose in order to protect the what? The infant industries. And which are these restrictions that the government can impose in order to, the restriction that the government can impose in order to protect the infant countries? Which are the restrictions? Which is, yes, the restrictions that the government can impose. Number one is just on the taxes. And that is generally on what we call the what? The custody. That is the custom duty, where the government imposes what we call the what? These are the restrictions that the government can do in order to do what? To protect the infant countries. One is on what we call the custom duty. Custom duty, or what we call what? These are some of the restrictions that the government may impose. Custom duty. This is normally imposed on all goods that are entering into our what? Into our country. And that is the reason for this one is just to reduce the what? Is just to reduce the imports. Then number two is what we call the quotas. Quotas. Now, when we talk of quotas, this is just a physical restriction which is imposed on the volumes of goods which may be imported. This just is on volumes of goods that may be imported. The volumes of goods that may be imported. And then the other one is also what we call the control of foreign currencies. The control of foreign currencies. Control of foreign currencies. Now, on the control of foreign currency, in this case, the government makes it hard for people to access the foreign exchange by making the import difficult. Now, that is on what we call the control over the foreign currency. The other one is through imposition of what we call the what? Subsidies. Subsidies in this case is whereby they will introduce it, or the government in this case will introduce the subsidies on the producers or the manufacturers of the locally manufactured what? Goods. The reason in this case is just to make the locally manufactured good cheaper. And as a result of that, they will not be able to import the other goods. Then the other one is also what we call the administrative control. Administrative control. Administrative control. Administrative control. Then we also have what we call the total ban or total ban, or what we call the trade embargo. This is whereby they will protect the domestic industry by imposing a total ban on what we call the imported what? Imported goods. And then the last one is Indian importation, import substitution. The import substitution in this case is whereby in this case they will collect what we call the balance of payments. Now, this is a question that is there in this sitting of May 2018. May 2018, and that is question number May 2018 question 2C, 2B. You are required May 2018, and I'm talking about the question 2C. Now, on May 2018 question 2C, you are told that you explain 6 reasons why a country might impose international trade restrictions. reasons why the government or a country might impose the international restrictions. This is just the reasons or the advantages of protectionism. And one of these is to protect the infant industries, protect the infant industries. That is number one, to protect the infant industries. Number two is to correct the balance of payments, balance of payment deficits, balance of payment deficits, balance of payment deficits. Number three is to raise the government revenue, and this is through the customs duty, raise the government revenue. And then the other one is also to discourage dumping of goods, and also to protect the strategic industries, and also for economic recovery argument, This is also a question that they also tested in May 2016, question number 7B. May 2016, question 7B. This case, you are to talk about the arguments in favor of the international trade restrictions in a country. That is what we've talked about. So the other thing that you need to know is on the balance of payments. And balance of payments in this case is just the difference between the receipts from other countries and payments to other countries. That is what we call the balance of payments. You also need to know the balance of trade. And also in this case, you need also to be aware of the contents of the components of a balance of payments. And then also you have to check on what we call the disequilibrium in balance of payments. Disequilibrium in balance of payments in this case is whereby there is what we call the balance of payments deficits. And you all have to know, when we talk of balance of payment deficits, in this case, this is whereby what you are paying to other countries is more than what you are receiving from the country, from those other countries. So what you pay is more than what you receive, and you need to be aware of what will cause that disequilibrium in that regard. And also you need to be aware of the methods or of curing unfavorable balance of payments, or generally the methods of curing the disequilibrium on balance of payments. Still also you need to be aware of what we call the currency devaluation or currency depreciation. Also need to know the difference and the effects of the currency devaluation, and also what we call the currency appreciation. You need also to check on those areas. Now, the other thing that you need to be aware is what we call the regional economic integration. Regional economic integration. Now, when you talk about the economic integration, this is the process or the state of affairs designed to abolish discrimination between the economic units belonging to different national trades or different national states. Now, in this case, what you need to know is on the types of economic integration, and then you also need to know the arguments for economic integration and also the arguments against economic integration. That one I will not take you through. You just have to read it on your own. Then the other thing is what we call the international institutions, and then what we call the Britain institution. The international institution, which in this case they are also known as what we call the Britain institution. Institutions. So on the international institutions, this one is whereby you will now be able to know more of IMF, that is International Monetary Funds. And therefore, in that case, you'll be able to know the objectives of the International Monetary Funds, which is also a question that was tested. That should be May 2018. When you check on May 2018, question number 2C, you are required to analyze the roles of international monetary funds to member countries. That is the objectives of IMF. And objectives of IMF in this case is just to facilitate and promote international trade among members or among the member countries. It's also to encourage what we call the economic cooperation among the member countries. Also to ensure there is what we call stability in foreign exchange rates, to eliminate also what we call the exchange rate control among member countries, and also to reduce this equilibrium in international balance of payments of members, and also to promote investments and what we call the capital formation. Those are the advantage or the objectives of what we call the international monetary funds, and that is what you are required to talk about in that regard. Then the second thing is on what we call the external debt problem. In this case, you have to know what causes, generally, when we talk about the external debt problems, this is now the problems that are arising as a result of borrowing. And in this case, you need to be aware the causes that we of persistent or rising external debts. What is making the company in this case to borrow more in that regard? And therefore also in that case, out of them, the country borrowing, there are also some other problems that are rising as a result of that. They may borrow the money and they misappropriate those funds. You also may have what we call the budgetary deficits, natural calamities, adverse conditions, and so forth. You also need to be aware of what will cause the persistent or rising of debts. Then still on the same, you need to know of what we call the exchange rates. And the exchange rates in this case, there are two different systems under which exchange rates are determined. There is what we call the floating or stroke what we call the fluctuating exchange rate systems. And then there is what we call the free float. So in that case, you need to know on the advantages of floating system, and then also what we call the other one is not the free rate, but what we call the fixed exchange rate system. You also need to know the advantages and disadvantages of each. The last one is on the economic growth and development. On the economic growth and development. And on the economic growth and development, you need to be aware of what we call the indicators of a company that is growing, that is economic growth. And then also you need to be aware, you also need to be aware of what we call the reasons of for low levels of economic growth in less developed countries. And also you need to know the benefits of economic growth, roles of industrial development in economic growth, and so forth. And then you'll also need to talk of the development planning and such, development planning and such. So what I want to do, I will just now pick a sitting, which we're going to go through it, the whole of that sitting. We'll go through the whole of that sitting. And then from there, we'll be able to proceed. From there, we'll now be able to proceed. So in this case, I will begin with this sitting of May 2016. And before I go to May 2016, there is a question that I had promised to do. There is a question that I said that yesterday I will do the question. That is on market structures. That is on November 2019, question number 3C. November 2019, question 3C. November 2019, question 3C. Before we get to May 2016, let's talk about November 2019, question 3C. This is on the market structures, and that is under the perfect competitive markets. This is what we've been told, that firm operating under perfect competition observed that at a unit price of 20 of product R, 600 units were sold. At increased price of 70, the sales of product R decreased by 500 units. Then the relationship between the price of product R and the quantity of R is linear. The total cost TC of product R is given by the function, and we've been given the function there, where Q is the quantity of the product R produced and sold. Then you are required the revenue function of the product R, and then the profit earned at equilibrium, and then the equilibrium price. Now, this is when you are told that in this case, the price of these is what we call the linear, is whereby we say y is equals to a plus or minus bx. This is now the linear equations. That is the linear equation. And therefore, in our case here, we know on demand, for you to get the price, this is on demand, not supply, because this is what is being sold. So in demand, we say that price is equals to A minus BQ. Price is equals to A minus BQ. So in our case, when the price is 20, we don't know A minus, we know the units in this case that will be sold, they will be 600 units. So it will be, the units we know is a quantity. It will be 600B. Then also again, we were told that if the price is increased to 70, the units will now reduce by 500 units, meaning that they will be how much? 100 units. Therefore, in that case, we now we have formed a simultaneous equation, and therefore we can look for the value of what? A and B, which in this case, this will be negative 50 is equals to minus 600 minus 600 minus 100, which in this case it will be how much? Minus, it will be minus 500B, minus 500B, where in that case B will be of how much? What will be the value of B? What will be the value of B? What will be the value of B? That is minus 50. You divide by minus 500. 0.1 is supposed to be 0.1, and that is our B, 0.1. So we look for A, we replace with either of these, which is A minus 600, 0.1. In that case, itakupea ngapi? A will be minus what? This is 60, it will be minus 40. So in that case, our A in this, or not minus, because if I take it on this other side, it will be 8. So A, in that case, our P will be equals to A, which is 80, plus B. B in this case, we've been told is how much? B in this case, we've gotten 0.1 Q. That is the quantity. That is now the price. In our case, you are required to look for the revenue function. In our case, we are required to look for the revenue function. In our case, we are required to look for the revenue function. So in that case, we know the revenue function, which is CR, is price you multiply by what? Quantity. We know the price, it is 80 plus 0.1 Q. You multiply by Q, which in that case, it will be 80 Q plus 0.1 Q squared. That is now the revenue function, and that is on Roman 1. Now on Roman 2, minus what? BQ, or this one should be minus. Remember, this is on demand. Yeah, it will be negative, not positive. It will be negative. So that is how you will get that. This one will be that case. Remember, this is on demand, where P is minus A minus BQ on demand. And this is our total revenue function. Then number 2, you are required to look for the profit and at equilibrium. The profits and at equilibrium. Profit and at equilibrium. Now, profit in this case, the profit in this case, we've been given there. The profit at an equilibrium is whereby in this case, the total revenue is equal to total cost, which in generally, we mean that the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And therefore, in this case, we can look for the marginal revenue. Now, marginal revenue in this case, we just differentiate the what? You differentiate the total revenue function. You differentiate the total revenue function. You differentiate the total revenue function. The total revenue function. Now, there are those that are asking about the negative in this case. Already here, I know we've gotten a positive here. This is 600 minus 100, which is negative 600 plus 100, which in that case is negative 500. So at the end of it here, I know we've gotten a positive, but in demand always, it is not supposed to be a negative slope. That is why in this case, it's supposed to be a negative. It's not a positive. So in that case, after we come here, which in this case, the total revenue function is 80 minus 0.1 Q. If I differentiate this is how it will look like. This will be 1, you multiply by 80, 1 you multiply by 80, the marginal revenue. Q, 1 minus 1 minus 0.1 you multiply by 2, Q 1 minus 2 minus 1. So in this case, this will be just 80 minus, this will be 0. What? 0.2 Q. 0.2 Q. That is the marginal revenue. Same case, you look for the marginal cost. Now, marginal cost in this case, you also differentiate. We'll also differentiate the total cost function. Total cost function. And our total cost function in this case was 0.92 9Q squared. You add 3Q plus 1,000. So I can also differentiate this to be 2 you multiply by 0.9 Q squared. Yes? Ati? Is it 30Q? Oh yeah, 30Q, yeah. So in this case, this will be 0.9Q 2 minus 1 plus 1 you multiply by 30Q, 1 minus 1, which in this case it will be 1.8Q plus 30 what? Q. That is marginal cost. So at equilibrium, marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost, which in this case you can just take 8. 30, not Q, yeah. So that one will be equals to, the marginal revenue is 80 minus 0.2 Q, which is equals to 1.8 Q plus 30. So I bring this to this side. This will be 80 minus 30 is equals to 1.8 plus 0.2 what? Q. So in this case, it will be, this is 50 is equals to 2Q. So Q in this case will be how much? 25 units. That is 25 units. Or in that case, kama hiyo itakushinda, you can also use this other way. We know to get the profits, in this case, it's supposed to be total revenue minus total cost. So at equilibrium, the profit is supposed to be what? 0. At equilibrium, profit is equals to 0. So in that case, I will just take the total revenue function, which is 80Q minus 0.1 Q squared. Then I minus the total cost. Total cost is 0.9 Q squared. 0.9 Q squared. I add 30Q, then plus 1,000. I add 30Q, then plus 1,000. So in that case here, I will now make this, this is negative 0.1 Q squared. You add, you minus 0.9 Q squared. Then in that case, plus 80Q minus 30, then minus 1,000. So in this case, this is giving you how much? This is the 1Q, that is Q squared, negative Q squared, right? Plus 50Q minus 1,000. That is now the profit function, and we know is equals to 0. So we can look for value of Q, which in this case we know how to get X is minus B plus what? The square root of B squared minus 4AC. You divide by 2A. So in this case, minus 50 plus minus the square root of B squared, which is 50 squared, minus 2, multiply by 4, you multiply by 1, multiply by negative 1,000. And then you divide by 2, multiply by 1. So this will be negative 50 plus, this is what, how much? 4,000 you add 2,500. 4,000 you add 2,500. How much are you getting from that? What is the square root of if it's 4,000? I add 25. It will be 7,500. 65. So what is the square root of 65? Yes? 8 or 80? 8 point. That is okay. Then you divide by 2. This is 8.06. When you take 50 squared, then this is minus, which will be positive. 6,500, square root of 6,500. 80 point. So is 80.62, which in that case it will give you how much? What will be our x? What will be our x? Given how much? 65. Kuna 65.31. And the other one is 15. This is negative. So 15 units, which is different from this. And I think here we've got it wrong. Where have we done it wrong? 65? 115. Negative 65 and 15. So in that case, no, this is not supposed to be that way. So 1,000. No, we are looking at the profit at equilibrium. No. Realize in this case, we are looking for the units that made up that profits. Yeah, it's not supposed to be this way. Yeah, use this one. Use this way, the one that we've done. This is when you are just looking for the number of units. This is when you are looking for the break-even point in units. Also, when you are looking for break-even point in units is when you express the profit to be equals to 0. When you are looking for break-even point in units. At break-even point, that is whereby the profit is supposed to be 0. Also, at break-even point, that is where the profit is supposed to be 0. Now Roman number 3 is the equilibrium what? Equilibrium price. Now, equilibrium price will be P is equals to, we say it is A minus. The price in this case will go to tumepata ngapi? 80 minus 0 point. This was the price, which was 80 minus 0.1. And therefore, in that case, it will be just 80, 0.1 you multiply by 20, 25, which in that case, what will be the price at equilibrium? 0.1 times 25. This is 2.5, which is 3. So it will be around what? 7.5. And that is the price at equilibrium. That is the price we have P, and you know the units at equilibrium. That is no, in this case, you are required to look for the profit and at equilibrium. Though we know the units at the equilibrium, that one will be that. So for profits here, for profits in this case, you just replace the profit function, where in that case, where is the profit function? or the profit function in this case will just be what? The total revenue minus the total cost. So total revenue in this case ilikuwa, that is we add 80 minus Q minus 0.1 Q, that is 80 Q minus 0.1 Q squared. We want first to get the total profit function, then you minus the total function, which is 0.9 Q squared plus 30 Q plus 1000. So in that case, the profit function tulipata is negative Q squared minus our plus 50Q minus 1000. So you just replace with the Q. This will just be negative 25 squared, then 50, you multiply by 25, and then you add 1000, you minus 1000. So what will be the profit earned at equilibrium? What will be the profit earned at equilibrium? This is 625. This one is how much? What are the profit earned at equilibrium? 875. That is the profit at equilibrium. That is on that regards, that is how you are required to do for that question. Now we go to May 2016, the question that I've said I will talk about. May 2016, and I will begin with question number 1. We begin in the question number 1. Now on question number 1, of May 2016, now that is where I am, May 2016. May 2016, or you are copying on that? And screenshot on that very fast so that we may go to this sitting. May 2016. May 2016. Now let's get to question number 1. Number 1, you are required, question number 1, you are required, question number 1, on May 2016, question number 1, you are required. You outline 4 assumptions underlying consumer equilibrium. Assumptions underlying consumer equilibrium. Underlying consumer equilibrium. Now that is question number 1A. Now this is under what we call the consumer theory, or what we call the theory of consumer behavior. And this is whereby we normally talk about the cardinalist and ordinalist theory. So on the basis of that, you just need to know the assumptions of both the ordinarist and the cardinalist theory. And these are the assumptions that are underlying the consumer equilibrium. So number one is that it assumes that what? Utility is what? Measurable. Utility is measurable. Number two, the marginal, it also assumes that what? The marginal, there is what we call the consumer what? Consumer is rational. That is consumer rationality. Number three, it also assumes that utility, that is on now the ordinal, depends on units consumed. Units consumed. The other one is also assumed that what? Marginal utility is what? Constant. Marginal utility is constant. The marginal utility is constant. And that is what you are required to talk about. Then the other thing that also you need to know is we required on Roman number B. On B, we talk about with an aid of a well-labeled diagram, we talk about the production possibility what? Production possibility. This is now the introduction to the economics. So in that case, this is how it's supposed to look like. Production possibility. So in this case, I will have the agricultural goods. I will also have the manufactured goods. And then I will also have, that is a concave. I will also have that. I will have point A, I will have point B, I will also have point C, and I will also have point D in that regard. I will also have point D in that regard. This is A, B, and D. Can draw that, then you write. Can draw that and then you write, say, write and say this represents a locus of point, presents a locus of all the combined points, locus of all the combined points of goods and services. A country can produce of goods and services. A country can produce when all the resources a country can produce, when all the resources are fully utilized, and they are efficient. See, assuming that a country is producing two types of goods, that is, assuming that a country is producing two types of goods, that is agricultural goods and manufacturing goods, agricultural goods and manufacturing goods, Full stop, you say, same. The operating cost of producing either of these goods, the operating cost of producing either of the commodities is increasing, which is illustrating, is increasing, which is illustrating the law of diminishing returns, which is illustrating the law of diminishing returns. Same points of the curve, that is A and B. Points of on the curve A and B, points on the curve A and B shows the maximum combined output, shows the maximum combined output of the two commodities. The maximum combined output of the two commodities. Say point C, point D shows or implies that some resources are unemployed, and the economy can produce, any combination, any combination within any combination inside the curve or within the curve, inside the curve. Say at point C, the country's present capacity, may not be achievable, unless the present capacity is increased, thus shifting the curve outwards. That's shifting the curve outwards. That's shifting the curve outwards. That's shifting the curve outwards. That is what you need to be aware on the same. That is why what we mean to be aware on the same. Now the other one, number C. You are required to summarize 5 ways through which the government should influence the allocation of resources in free market economy. The government could influence the allocation of resources. That is through what we call the free market economy. Now, this is now taking us back to what we call the introduction on what we call the economic systems. There is what we call the free market economy, and there is what we call the planned economy and mixed economy. Now, on free market economy, this is whereby the prices are set by what we call the price mechanisms. That is now what we mean when we talk about the free market economy. Now, on planned, this is whereby now the prices of commodity are set by an economic appointed body by the state. And that in this case, this is now where we say that the state is involved. And then there is mixed economy where we have both the state and also the price mechanism. Now, in our case, we are required to talk about the ways in which the government can influence the allocation of resources in a public in a free market economy. Now, in this case, the government is not involved, but now how will they intervene in this case in order to ensure there is what we call, or to improve on, or to influence the allocation of resources in a public, in a free market economy, where the prices are set by the what we call the price mechanism. So how will the government in this case, or the ways in which the government may influence the allocation of resources in a free market economy? So which are these ways? How will the government in this case influence? The government influence allocation of resources in a free market economy. How will the government influence in this case? Through the subsidies. Implementation of policies. They implement some policies in order to ensure that the policies are supposed to be followed. I've been taught about the subsidies. We also have been taught about the implementation of policies. What else? What else? I'm also waiting to hear from you, the online students, Zoom students. I also want to understand what the government in this case can, ways in which the government may influence, the allocation of resources, and this is through the what? Allocation of resources, and this is through where there is what we call the free market economy. Free market economy. Yes. How will the government in this case intervene? Now I can hear from you distribution of taxes, also introduction of rules and regulations. The government may encourage encourage production in certain, government encouraging the citizens in productions in some areas. Okay, let's talk of the ways in which the government, could influence the allocation of resources, ways in which the government could influence the allocation of resources in a free market economy. The allocation of resources in a free market economy. Number one is through the imposition of taxes. Imposition of taxes. Number two, encouraging the citizens through productions, encouraging the citizens through major productions by providing subsidies. The other one, implementation of rules and regulations implementations of rules and regulations in the market, implementation of rules and regulations in the markets, implementation of rules and regulation in the market. The other one is through product differentiation, through product differentiation. This is whereby the government will now encourage the industries to produce not one type of commodity, but different types of what? Different types of commodities. The other one is also by providing for it. Let me just talk of not just providing, but in this case you say through the adequate provision of public goods, What we mean in this case, the government may also intervene in providing laws and what? They will also provide the prices for loads and what? Loads, street rights in that regard, which in this case for the load in this case is also encouraging what? The business. And then also you can also talk of you can also talk of through stabilization of economy by use of physical and monetary policies. Physical and monetary policies. Physical and monetary policies. Physical and monetary policies. And that is what you need to talk about in that regard. Now, the other question is on D. You are required to explain the concept of elasticity of demand guides economic decision in the following areas. Number one, government tax policy on household consumption, devaluation policy, and a price discrimination on that case. So this is on demand, and that is on the elasticity of demand. On the elasticity of demand, and generally on elasticity of demand is just on the importance of elasticity of demand. So we can begin with number one, the government tax policy. And that is on household consumption. How the elasticity of demand guides economic decision in those areas. Number one, we've been told on the government tax policy and on house consumption. You write and say, if the objective of the government, if the objective of the government is to raise revenue, the targeted product should be priced inelastic, in order to ensure that consumers continue to buy the product, despite the increases in prices, the increase in prices, despite the increase in prices. Say also, you add and say, if the commodity is price elastic, if the commodity is price elastic, taxing it will not bring much revenue. Taxing it will not bring much revenue. Taxing it will not bring much revenue. The other one is on devaluation policy. Devaluation policy. Devaluation policy. Same. Devaluation refers to the deliberate effort by a country. Devaluation refers to the deliberate effort by a country to lower the values of its currency, to lower the values of its currency, to lower the values of its currency. You also add and say, this in turn will make exports cheaper. This in turn will make exports cheaper and the imports more expensive. This in turn will make the exports cheaper and imports more expensive. Also, and I say, for this policy to work, the exports and imports must be price inelastic. The exports and imports must be price inelastic. Must be price inelastic. The other one is on price discrimination. Price discrimination on by a monopolist. Price discrimination by a monopolist. Right and say, if demand for a product is price inelastic, then the monopolist increases the price, then the monopoly increases the prices, which may lead to or may help the business, to increase the sales revenue. So, and I'm saying, if the demand is price elastic, then increase in price in a monopolist, will lead to a loss in revenue. And that is what you are required to talk about in that regard. Now, let's talk of what we call the number two. Number two, you are required to differentiate between the following sets of terms as used in economics. Number one, we have the structured unemployment, and number two, the Bayesian unemployment. That is on now the unemployment. And you write and say, structured unemployment write and say this results from an imbalance. This results from an imbalance. This results from an imbalance between. This results from an imbalance between supply of a particular group of workers, between supply of a particular group of workers, between supply of a particular group of workers and the demand for their services. The demand for their services. E.g., you say technological changes may make the product. Technological changes may make the product on which a particular industry is based. Technological changes may make a particular product on which the industry is based obsolete. 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 Then the other one is what we call the Bayesian unemployment. The Bayesian unemployment. Right, and say this is where there is no demand for products produced. This is where there is no demand for products produced by a certain type of labor. Products produced by a certain type of labor. We also call it the demand deficient unemployment. So that is what we mean in that regard. Now let's talk about Roman 2. There is what we call the narrow money and also what we call the what? Broad money. Narrow money and broad money. So what is the distinction between a narrow money and a broad money? What's the distinction? Narrow money and broad money. November 20, that is on May 2016. Yes, still on question 2. Tunaambiwa kuna what we call what? Narrow money. There is also what we call what? Broad money. So what's the difference between these two? Narrow money and a broad money. What do we mean when we talk? This is on money and banking. So what do we mean when we talk about the narrow money? Yes, narrow money. Then we have what we call the broad money. Yes. What's narrow money? Step. What is narrow money? And then what is the broad money? From the word narrow. And then there is what we call what? Broad. So what is the narrow and what is broad? Yes, Ken. Narrow money and a broad money. Yes. When we talk about narrow money, what do we mean? And a broad money, what do we mean? Yes. That is, I've said, is on area of money and banking, I think. Yeah, on money and banking. So what is narrow money and what is broad money? Now, when we talk about narrow money, this is whereby is that money that can be spent within a what? Very short time. So broad money is the one that will now be spent for a span of time. Are we together? So you write and say narrow money, say This is the money. This is the money. This is the money that is spent within a very short time in particular smaller units as a medium of exchange. In particular smaller units as a medium of exchange. As a medium of exchange. As a medium of exchange. Number two, we have what we call the broad money. This is the money that is durable. The money that is durable, which can be used, that is durable, which can be used for a span of time, and the owner and the order can obtain, goods and services. Durable. That is now what we call the broad money. Now let's continue. The other one is on number B, that is number 2B, which we are required to talk about the disadvantages of a monopoly market structure. Disadvantages of a monopoly market structure. So this is on the market structure and on what we call the monopoly markets. Market structure that is under what we call the monopoly markets. The disadvantages. Number one, disadvantages of a monopoly structure. Now, in this case, when you talk about monopoly, a monopoly in this case is a market structure that is having only what? Single seller. So what are the disadvantages in these regards? Number one, these economies of scale. Say, on that you write and say, while many farms can grow, while many farms can grow to large farm or can grow to large size, and explain the economies of scale, there is a danger that eventually they will suffer these economies of scale. Number two, consumer exploitation. Number three, in this case you are told to highlight, so you just highlight inefficiency. Number four, you talk about the lack of motivation. And number five is lack of optimal allocation. Of resources. Lack of optimal allocation of resources. Lack of optimal allocations of resources. Now, number C, a certain market for commodity X maintains 1,000 identical consumers, each having a demand function given us. Each having a demand function given as follows. This is a demand function. That is question number 2C. Demand function, the QDX is equals to 12 minus 12 px. Then there is a certain market for commodity X maintains 1,000 identical consumers, each having a demand function as QDX, which is 12 minus Px. The market maintains 100 identical producers of X, which in this case, each will have a supply function of 2x 20 px. Then you are required the market demand and the market supply. The market demand and market supply. So in this case, the quantity demanded, it will be by how many consumers? We've been given the number of consumers and we know the number of consumers ni wangapi? 1,000. Will that mean that the QDX in this case will be the quantity demanded will be of what? 1,000 of all these. And then which should be equals to 12 minus 12 px, right? That is what, no, 1,000 identical consumers. Yes, that is how it's supposed to be. And then we've been given the QX, which is 220 px. Now the market contains how many identical producers? The market contains 100 identical producers, which in this case, the QSX is equals to what? 1,000. So 20 px is equals to 100, not 1,000, sorry. So our px in this case will be of how much? Our px will be 5. So what will be the quantity? Quantity supply to just be 20, you multiply by 5, which will just remain as 100. And then for this one, the market demand for this one will be of how much? We know 12 here. So in this case, I make the 12 the subject of the formula, which in this case will be 1,000 is equals to 12 minus 12 px. So our px will be equals to how much? 12 minus this, which is 988 divided by 12. So our px will be 8, yes, 82.3. So in that case, the quantity demanded will also be what? If you multiply it, will just let you to, sorry? I'm not getting, what do you mean? Only 2. 2, yes, 2 px, sorry. So if you to be negative 2 right, supposed to be, oh sorry, this is that is on the equilibrium, right? The equilibrium. That is QDX. Oh, this is what the question is asking, sorry. This is how, for market demand, before we get to market supply, I've realized these are consumers. We are talking about a commodity market that for commodity X is 1,000 identical consumers. Yes. So how will that one be? This is how it's supposed to be. Now, in this case, when we talk about the market demand will just take the number of consumers plus the demand for each what? Consumer. So in our case, the QDX is how much? Is supposed to be 12 minus 2 what? 2 PX. Sawa. So ni kumaanisha out of the 1,000 identical consumers, each will be demanding what? All these. So in that case, it will be 1,000 multiplied by 12 minus 2 PX, which in that case, it will be 12,000 minus 2,000 PX. Remember, in that case, they're asking about the demand function. So that is how it's supposed to be. Quantity demanded. That is how it's supposed to be. Remember, it's not on the values, but the demand function. So that will be the market demand. So for the market supply, it is how many suppliers? 1,000 how many producers here? We have 1,000. So we've been given the QSX, which is how much? 20 PX. But unajua 1,000 ndo watakuwa wanahitaji each at how much? 20 PX. So in that case, it will be 2,000 PX. And that is how you are required to do that. That is how you will have to look for, because we are required to look for the market demand and market supply what? Market demand and market supply function. Market demand and market supply function. That is how it will look like. Then the other thing we are also required to look for is using the difference curve, you illustrate the effect. That is number B, Roman 2. Using the difference curve, you illustrate the effects of the government subsidy on a commodity X to lower the income, to low income earners. And this is how you're supposed to illustrate it. So in this case, I'm talking about good X, good Y, and then we'll have good X. Good X and Y. So in this case, this is how it will shift. We have AB, and then we have B1. AB and B1. So after you do that, you write and say subsidies makes goods cheaper, and therefore subsidies make goods cheaper, and therefore subsidies make goods cheaper, and therefore subsidies make cheaper, and therefore since the goods are cheaper, and therefore since the goods are cheaper, then the quantity demanded increases, and then the quantity demanded increases, hence the budget line pivots, and the budget line pivots from AB to AB1. Pivots from AB to IAB1, from AB to AB1, meaning that the consumer has the ability and capacity, meaning that the consumer has the ability and capacity, consumer has the ability and capacity to consume good ads, to consume good ads. We'll continue from there in our other class.